Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, April the 2nd in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, British Columbia. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, so away we go. Walter, it has been a very bad week for the planet and people, the people of BC. You almost feel like Churchill, right? We'll fight on the beaches, we'll fight on the landing fields because we're being just under.
Yeah, and it's so funny because we'd like to talk about positive things too, but you know, every time I've come in the last several weeks, particularly, it always seemed like, wow, boy, a lot happened last week. You know, like, is this the world seems to be spinning a little faster these days.
So it's up to us. We cannot count, unfortunately, as far as I can see, on any of the politicians, because, you know, and I understand their points of view, because if any politician dared to stand up for the kinds of things that I think most people want, they'd be destroyed either by their party elite, or, and I'm talking in any party, or the media. So I understand why the politicians can't do anything, but if we could build up a power base, and when I say we, I just mean the people of Canada, the people of British Columbia, to support some politicians, maybe they'd start to do something on our behalf.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of politicians that could have a little more courage, you know. A little bit more, but on the
Bob Simpson had courage.
Sure.
Bob Simpson was an NDP MLA here in British Columbia, I think one of the best in the province. He had courage. He was first kicked out of the NDP, and he continued as an MLA. He sat as an independent, and in the next election, which was the election just passed, the NDP ran, I guess, a strong candidate against him, split the vote, and the Liberal won. So that's the extent that all the parties, the big party, that's the way they play the game. They have an agenda that has nothing to do. So, you know, there's a courageous MLA, and there's lots, they are there, but they know what's going to happen to them.
Well, okay, right. I mean, just a little bit of leadership. Come on, give us a little bit, and that's all. But I know what you mean.
Right.
If there's not a groundswell, I've heard it many times from whenever I've gone to make appeals to our elected representatives, and they'd say, well, you know, if there was more concern about this, we'd be more apt to do something about it. But you're the only one.
Are they crazy
about it?
If there was more concern? You know,
that's what they tell me. Okay?
I know, but they know there's concern and they don't do anything. That's the problem. They know so this past week, under cover of darkness and many other things, Christy Clark changed the BC Parks Act. And it seems that under the new changes, they can build pipelines through our parks, they can build roads through our parks. Basically, the parks are open. The parks have taken a big hit. And this is only the next step. I mean, after that, they'll make more changes, but that's what happened this week.
Well, the parks are saying yes to jobs and building an economy. That's what they want. But I mean,
no public. The public was kept completely in the dark, not only by the Liberals, but where was the NDP and where was the media?
Yeah, well, they're not getting coverage if they are criticizing. The Elections Act was changed last week. I think maybe might have mentioned it, but you know, now municipal elections are going to be held every 4 years.
No, that happened?
Yeah. It wasn't it changed? I thought it was changed.
They're talking about it. That's as far as I'd go. They're talking about it.
Okay, I may be wrong on that. I hope I'm wrong on it.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, if the people of BC want to elect our city politicians for 4 years instead of 3, then we should do that. But for Christy Clark to do it, is just undemocratic.
There's no discussion going on. It's just, you know,
it's much worse than undemocratic, but that's not a 4-letter word.
And, you know, of course, the things that are happening in the Ukraine, if you want to add some of the bad stuff, and which looks more and more like, you ever seen the movie Wag the Dog? It was about how
No.
these PR firms invented a crisis. They invented a country, I think, and then they made the crisis, and it was all to distract the public from a real story or something
Well,
really
I think
happening.
Ukraine is a real story. I mean, there's lots of people involved, and there's important things happening. But the story we're being told in our media is certainly not the real story. That's, to me, that's the problem.
Well, they were depicting it like the Russian soldiers were invading Crimea and stuff like that, and they were desperately looking for any casualties. Of course, there wasn't any, but there weren't any guns fired.
You know, I saw something.
But they're desperately trying to make it into a huge story, Jack. I'm not saying it's not a story, but it's just you have to wonder exactly what's going on when Stephen Harper is bringing democracy to the Ukraine. Okay, and John Baird and all that crowd.
Oh, I do wonder.
Something's up.
I mean, I really wonder. So I know the story we're being told. Here, this is something I got. He writes for Zed Magazine, The Independent. He writes for Counterpunch. His name is Andy Piasczyk. I'll just read the first paragraph of what he says here. He's talking about the Ukraine right now and what's going on. The U.S. is imposing sanctions on Russia. And so is Canada, of course. I mean, what a pathetic joke. As the United States imposes sanctions on Russia and moves to do likewise to Venezuela, it's essential to keep in mind which country it is that's the most destructive and dangerous in the world today. When this question is posed in international polls in recent decades, the answer overwhelmingly is the United States. So when they do international polling and ask which country is the most dangerous and destructive in the world, people around the world say it's the United States. I'd agree. It's interesting that these polls are never mentioned here. Not Iran, not North Korea, not Syria, Cuba, Venezuela, not Russia, or any of the many other nations the ruling class and corporate media here regularly demonize, but the United States. So that's what we're up against.
Well, they're part and parcel of the whole production. The corporate media, academia, it's all together, all our information, and these corporations are all tied together. So it's a story they like to tell together.
Yeah, and when I criticize the United States here, it's got nothing to do with the people of the United States. They have as little control over their country as we have over ours. It's just the corporate government of the United States. There's lots of great people in the United States, like any other country, and there's lots of great people in the U.S. government, but it doesn't matter because seems to be this evil cabal at the top that rules.
Yeah, it seems pervasive, and it's here in British Columbia to a certain degree, and it's everywhere.
Yeah. So it's up to us. I mean, as hopeless as that sounds, we can't count the media. The media's gone, owned by the other side. The politicians are owned by the other side. We have no structure, so it's actually up to the people here, all of us. And do any of us feel up to that kind of a task?
Well, not yet, maybe, but I think there is a tipping point to everything. There's a certain point people just won't take it anymore, and that's been shown time and again. So I think they're counting on the public remaining uninformed, and they might pull it off. Who knows?
This is so today is April the 2nd. A couple of days ago on Monday, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report that people have been talking about for a while now. Not talking about it much in the Canadian media, but this is what I got. I can't remember which site this came from, but in a new United Nations report released on Monday morning, scientists come to a stark conclusion. Unless the world changes course immediately and dramatically, the fundamental systems that support human civilization are at risk.
Yeah. Does that mean we can't have our pipelines? Does that mean we can't ship all that massive amount of coal to Asia? You know, what does that mean, Jack? What's our economy tied into? We're inextricably tied into now, addicted to the oil economy. Harper and his boys are every day making sure that we're
The
going
day
to,
after this or the day before this, Christy Clark was off to Ottawa to push her crazed LNG project. I mean,
yeah.
It's just pathetic what the government of this province is doing, but unless the world changes course immediately and dramatically, the fundamental systems that support human civilization are at risk. So we've got to change. I mean, everything has to change, and it's already too late in many ways, but we've still got to start.
Well, Al Gore, he had said something like it was a moral or our moral imperative or our ethical thing. We should protect the planet, but I don't agree with him. I mean, if you read that, that's science there, scientists talking. Do you want to survive, or do you want to die? Do you want to just? It's not just a moral, ethical question anymore. It's like, are you going to stand in the middle of the road and let the car run over you? Or are you going to step aside? Are you going to do something? We're in a crisis that just pretty overrides all ideologies and all presumptions of what we're up to. It's a survival issue. It's pretty simple, and in order to survive, you have to do certain things, and you got to direct your economy, in a proper way for long-range change. Many countries are making fantastic strides ahead with renewable energy, and in Western Europe, making great strides. And you're going to find more and more countries are going to become sustainable and not having to be on the petroleum treadmill. So, I mean, there's great things happening at the same time. It's just that these guys, that the oil people, they just will, they'll make every cent they can out of the market until it collapses. Basically, that's all they're there for.
And so Canada has become, in many respects, one of the worst countries in the world. When you're on the list like protecting the environment or child poverty, among the richer nations. These kinds of issues, we're now at the bottom. So it's up to us. We have to overthrow our governments and bring in democracy. I honestly don't know what else we can do, because our governments have left us behind. They've gone to work for the very corporations that, as you've just said, are basically destroying everything. So the governments are gone, the media is gone. It's just up to us. And really, it is, as you say, it's a survival issue. We can't just continue to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, people love their children. They don't want their children to die. They don't want their families to die. They don't want themselves to die.
It's
and
pretty
really,
simple.
that's what it's up to now. It's at that level of danger.
Yeah, and I think if we sort of put a lot of other things aside, I know myself personally, in the last few years, I've worked a lot more with what would be traditionally thought of as conservatives or libertarians, or even liberals. I mean, I always saw myself as being somewhat of a left-winger, not so much so anymore. I mean, it's kind of desert over there right now with the people who are occupying.
Yeah, but I think everybody would find that.
Yeah.
We have a lot. I mean, we have to have a lot in common, because this way of working, which is all antagonistic, we're all doing, it's all about, the individual. I mean, that's the corporate line, because really it's all about the corporation.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore, because it is the road.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, was we had very few differences. I was very surprised how few differences I had when it came right down to it. And these divisions, I think, are artificial for the most part. Most people want the same thing worldwide. We all want peace. Who doesn't want to have peace? Who doesn't want to have a healthy environment? Who doesn't want to have a future for the planet? I mean, what's so hard to work out here?
But there is a small group of people who don't want peace because they keep creating wars. I mean,
Yeah.
quite deliberately, they set out. I mean, look what's happened. They attacked Afghanistan, blaming 9/11 on the people of Afghanistan. Look at the nightmare they've created. Then Iraq, 1.5 million innocent people dead in Iraq, the country devastated. Then Syria. So they're out there. We've got to get rid of them because they're leading us to a place where, personally, I'd prefer not to go.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, and even the Ukrainian crisis, you know, with you have the Russians lining up all their military along the Russian border and
We
all
don't
these
even know
exercises. And but you know, from what the reports are, I mean, this is playing very well in Russia. You know, Putin's very popular.
Yep.
And what's not to like about this scenario? He gets to be the big leader and all that. And in the West, they all look great, bringing democracy to the Ukraine. You know, it's all.
Does anybody still believe that? I mean, do people still believe
Well, that's
that?
the story.
That's the story.
And we're teaching them how to be democratic.
Yeah.
and of course, we're getting the IMF and the World Bank in there to help us all out too. So I mean, this is working out for both parties here.
I want to move on to the issue of vaccination because vaccines are big in the media as this is being filmed, which is, again, April 2nd. There's a measles outbreak somewhere. It's being treated like, you know, the end of the world. It's true. I mean, the fact that the scientists are saying climate change could be the end of the world, that gets no play in the media. But I just want to say this. It's a complicated subject. I'm no expert, but I believe and have believed for a long time that vaccinations are unnecessary, are not effective, and also are not safe. I believe those three things. I could be wrong, but I don't trust any of the people who are telling me to get vaccinated. I don't trust the drug companies, I don't trust the media, and I don't trust our public health officials. So I don't know if you can focus in on these two graphs or even see them, but if not, we'll try to insert them later. It's just two graphs. The top one, you can see the line is going down, and you can see the line is going down. Okay. The top one is for measles, and the bottom one is for whooping cough. And basically, it's a line that goes down for both of them. And in both cases, after the vaccine is introduced, there's no change. It was already down to virtually nothing. We're talking here about deaths per 100,000. I don't know if the figures are from the United States or from Europe. That's where they're usually from. Just take a. I don't know where to find the information, but I have a feeling anybody who looks into it is going to find out there's a lot of controversy, there's discussion. Everybody maybe has their own beliefs, but there's a lot of good opinion, strong scientific opinion, saying that vaccines don't work, are unnecessary, and are unsafe, but it never gets mentioned. And instead, we have this push by the drug companies, the media, and the politicians, and the public health officials to get us all vaccinated.
It might be very, very dangerous in the long run too, over generations. And I don't think diseases like you see the measles, the mumps, whooping cough, these so-called childhood diseases, you know, are not playing very key roles in our immune system development, over and above just what immunization would occur, where they say that sort of tricks the body into thinking that you had the infection. There might be a lot more to it than just that. We're playing around with nature, and you know, we don't have a good record with that. You know, so that's all I say is, like, how much is really understood, and what are the motivations. And personally, I don't get flu shots, and maybe someday I'll regret that. My kids weren't vaccinated. I think we had to get a couple of things for them, but they're happy, healthy people. So I think it's much overblown, you know, to the way they're selling this thing. Somebody's making a lot of money off of it.
2 minutes left. What do we have?
Well,
Oh, I'll say one thing. This week, there's an excellent article in Victoria News, Saanich News, probably all the rest of them. It's the guy who runs Buckerfields talking about this new recycling plan that's been put in place by the Christy Clark government. Read the article. It's amazing. So corrupt.
well, the number, coming in, I listened to the CBC, 81 people died from using wireless devices in automobiles while driving last year by using cell phones and texting. 55 died while being intoxicated, so-called impaired, in British Columbia. So we have quite a high number. You know, a third more people are dying from using wireless technology in automobiles than for drinking. So we need a lot more attention paid to that. And I think the science is showing that, you know, that it's not just distracted driving, that these types of devices actually impair the operator of the vehicle. And it should be correctly be called impaired driving, impaired by cell phone radiation or texting radiation. There's lots of science behind that. And, you know, the crisis is here. North America wide, I think the trend is going to be all, you know, we're going to see a massive amount of suffering and death because of these devices. That didn't happen before, by the way. These are new accidents and lots and lots of injuries, billions of dollars worth of damage, you know, so it's a big deal.
Thank you, Walter.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
And thanks for watching Citizens Forum. Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum, segment 2. Our guest in this segment is Kai Nagata. Kai is with the Dogwood Initiative, and I think most people who watch this show know about the Dogwood Initiative. We were just talking about what are we going to talk about, and you mentioned a very interesting story about Christy Clark that I hadn't heard, and maybe you can just tell it again.
Sure, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, Jack. A story came out yesterday that our community picked up with some interest, and that was that Christy Clark once worked for a lobbying firm that did work for Enbridge. And this is a problem if she's the premier and she has final say over 60 construction permits that could determine the fate of the Northern Gateway pipeline. Of course, her office says that she never directly worked for Enbridge as a client, but the fact is that there are ties and connections between her family and her office, the people that she appointed to work for her office as premier, who were lobbyists for Enbridge.
Enbridge wants to build the Northern Gateway pipeline to bring tar sands bitumen to our west coast, and the premier of the province, Christy Clark, used to work for, can you say it again?
So she freelanced for a lobbying company that's owned by her former husband, Mark, and she worked for them sometime after they concluded a big contract with Enbridge doing lobbying of federal politicians and strategic communications advice. So this is her ex-husband who ran the company and had Enbridge as a client and was a registered lobbyist federally for Enbridge at the time. And then she stepped in supposedly after they'd wrapped up that contract, but the registry, the federal registry for lobbying shows that the company was still considered a lobbyist for Enbridge all the way up to the end of December that year. So this is after she left politics for the first time. She's working in her private life as a freelancer with her husband's company, and they are, according to the registry of lobbyists, still working for Enbridge the whole time that she's there and that she goes on and works for CKNW. So she was a journalist on air during the time period covered by that lobbying registry. Now that might be a clerical error. That's what the company is saying, that there's no overlap and that she never worked for Enbridge, and that's what the Premier's office is saying. But I think it's still a concern when you're starting to wonder whether your elected officials are working for the people or for the pipeline company.
You know, it's interesting that this has been kept, I mean, all completely secret. You'd think the media, it's a good story. Christy Clark worked for a company that was lobbying on behalf of Enbridge and that was owned by her former husband.
That's right.
It's amazing the stuff that gets kept secret.
Well, maybe it's a case of nothing surprising us anymore. If you look at the long list of federal and provincial politicians that have been lobbyists for Enbridge, I mean, not only were her chief of staff and other senior advisors former Enbridge lobbyists, you've got federal politicians like Chuck Strahl and Jim Prentice who have been on the payroll of the pipeline company. So there's this revolving door between government and the energy industry that I think should lead citizens to ask some legitimate questions about whose interests are being served.
Who's Chuck Strahl? I mean, the name is familiar, but I can't remember.
Chuck Strahl was a federal minister. He was at the time, the Indian Affairs Minister, and he was an MP in Chilliwack. The riding's now held by his son, but he's still very much active in conservative circles. And so since then, he became the chair of the watchdog overseeing CSIS, which is the agency responsible for protecting Canadians from terrorism. CSIS happens to have spied on Dogwood during that time, and Enbridge happens to have employed Chuck Strahl as a lobbyist throughout his time as a watchdog who was supposed to be overseeing the spies. So there's some connections there that make me deeply uncomfortable just as a voter and as a citizen.
That's also an amazing story. I mean, it's the stuff that's going on in this country is absolutely horrifying. And as we often say on this show, the fact that we don't know about it is perhaps the most horrifying part of everything. Given the stuff that's always in the media, the trivia, the nonsense, I like watching the Canucks, but huge amounts of time and energy are spent by the media on that, and we don't know. I mean, obviously, we are at the verge of, and probably already are, a petro-state, as they call these things.
Oh, I don't know that we're a petro-state. There's more people employed in producing beer than oil in Canada. We're led to believe that we're a petro-state. There's a lot of flashy ads on TV saying that oil is a really important part of our economy, but the fact remains it's a very small proportion of overall employment and GDP creation.
How about for profit creation? Although I know the beer companies do very well too.
Well, Alberta is a jurisdiction that relies definitely on oil extraction and exports to pay for social programs. They've gotten themselves into a situation where up to 40% of their budget some years comes from oil and gas revenues. And so it's absolutely in their interests to continue expanding those operations. They have no other choice. But in BC, we only have maybe 3.2% of our GDP being created by oil and gas extraction. It's not our resources that are being transported across BC in these pipelines and oil tankers, it's Alberta. So it's really a question of whose interests are being served. And I think as British Columbians, we have to ask ourselves, are we getting the fair end of this deal? But we know that Alberta has no choice but to dig this stuff up and move it. Otherwise, their budget will fall into deficit, as we've seen.
I think they must have a choice because Alberta existed and was prosperous before the oil sands were there, the tar sands. So I'm sure there's economic choices that have to be made. Here, what's happening right now with the pipeline? How do things stand?
Well, right now I hear a lot of talk about the inevitability of the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline, and I don't think that's the case. There's a political calculation being made right now in Ottawa, and Stephen Harper is going to have to decide whether the political ramifications of approving the pipeline outweigh the votes that he hopes to win by rejecting it. So I think that there's a balancing act at play, and there's some strong arguments within the Conservative inner circle for throwing Enbridge under the bus. And that's not a story that we talk about much, but the fact is, this is something that's been opposed by the Government of British Columbia, the Union of BC Municipalities, 130 First Nations, and 2/3 of the people in BC. So he's really taking a political risk by approving it. That could be the difference between winning another majority government and losing in 2015. So his MPs on the ground here in BC have to understand that this is a reality, and we know that those messages are filtering up to Ottawa saying, don't make us wear this in the next election, because if you approve Northern Gateway, you'll just unleash this political firestorm that could claim a lot of Conservative seats. And so Stephen Harper is a political animal. He makes decisions based on whether they win votes or lose votes and by what proportion. He's not interested in any sort of consistent ideology or philosophy. It's not about what he said 2 years ago. It's about how many seats can he win in the next election. So that's why I think Gateway is far from over as a debate.
Are you sure, or do you think, because I've never really thought that Christy Clark opposed Northern Gateway. I mean, do you think she does?
Well, we know that her ex-husband and her close friends and advisors, as well as former staff members, certainly didn't oppose Enbridge when they were working as lobbyists for the company. But Christy Clark, I think, is a person who goes where the political winds blow. And so it's our job as voters in British Columbia to let her know that whatever her past affiliations with the company, that this is not a project that has social license to proceed, and that people who contravene the will of the public will have to face those voters in the next election.
Okay. I'm not sure if you want to talk about the whole LNG thing, because while this is going on with the Enbridge pipeline, an entire new industry that is equally dangerous, I think, is being built up. Do you want to talk about that, or?
Well, we're dealing with proposals that are actually on the table, whereas with LNG, there's no concrete backing yet from industry. There's no proposals that have been submitted to the regulators, so we can't really deal with hypotheticals. As far as we can see so far, Christy Clark has a big dream, a big political promise, and nothing on the table to even suggest it's going to happen. So until those LNG projects are actually on the books, I think I'd prefer to focus on the issues that we've been fighting for the last 10 years, which are these pipeline proposals that have been rubber stamped so far by the federal regulator and have been pushed through in every way possible by the federal government.
So I'm sure there's a huge conglomeration of organizations, including your own, the Dogwood Initiative, working against it. What's being planned now? Do you want to talk a bit about the initiative process you're moving forward, or something else?
Sure. Well, let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever had a chance to vote on either of these pipelines?
No.
Why do you think that is?
Because we're not a democratic country.
What do you think would happen if we got a chance to actually vote?
I would hope you're talking about both Enbridge and Kinder Morgan.
Well, let's take Enbridge. What if you just held a referendum and asked people, do you actually want this pipeline to go through or not?
That's a good question. I hope it would be no. Do you know? Have you done polling? Are there numbers out there?
I mean, the suggestion from the polls we've done is that 2/3 of the people in the province, if it's about expanding oil tanker traffic on the coast, they're opposed to that.
Okay.
We know that organized labor is opposed. We know that 130 First Nations, the Union BC municipalities, and the provincial government are opposed. So that's a pretty strong consensus, and 2/3 is a pretty big political consensus to build on any issue. So when it comes to expanded oil tanker traffic, I think if we did have a vote, it'd be pretty clear what the results would be. But it's not really my job to tell people what to think about these projects. What I'm interested in is that we get a chance for a democratic decision on these projects. And the fact is that the National Energy Board process and the Joint Review Panel are not democratic mechanisms. These are industry appointees who are brought in to basically distract the public and the media for a few months before delivering a foregone conclusion. So that's not democracy. I think we need a chance to actually vote.
Do you just want to run through that process again? Because I think most people, including myself, don't really know what the process is that's happening right now.
So we have a unique law in British Columbia called the Citizens, we have the Initiative and Recall Act.
Oh, okay.
So this is a law that no other province has, and it provides for a mechanism called the Citizens Initiative. And so what that is a petition that you take around to voters in every riding around the province, and if you can get 10% of the people across the province who are registered voters to support this initiative, then you can actually submit a bill written by citizens to the legislature. And so I think it would be a good idea to submit a bill that dealt with this oil tanker question once and for all, that would have a political mandate behind it that we could then vote on. And since nobody in government seems to have the political will or the courage to bring forward this kind of legislation, I think it's up to us as citizens to do it, and we have a mechanism, thankfully, in British Columbia that allows us to do that. We're the only province with this kind of a direct democracy law. And so we're exploring the option. And at Dogwood, what we've done is gone out and talked to allies and partners and our organizers across the province. And so far, we know we've got 44 teams who could work starting tomorrow on a petition like this. What we want to do is make sure that we can cover off all 85 ridings across the province. And then a few things would have to happen. If Stephen Harper approves the Northern Gateway Pipeline, which, as I've said, is not a foregone conclusion, if Christy Clark then folds and accepts whatever deal they offer and starts to issue the permits to proceed with construction, then we would have to apply to Elections BC and say, let's have a petition on this. Let's actually take this out to the people and see what they think. And then when you get approval from Elections BC, you get a 90-day window where over those 3 months you have to collect 10% of the signatures from all of the registered voters in the province.
So your group is thinking of going ahead with this if it's approved and if it looks like it's going to be moving ahead with the support of the BC government.
That's right. I think that in a democracy you should have a chance to vote on these things, and we haven't. And I think that there's a lot of steps before we get to shovels actually going in the ground.
What is the timeline now? What's happening next?
Well, we are anticipating a decision on the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline from the federal cabinet in late June. Their deadline is June 19th. So sometime in the next 3 months, we're expecting to hear whether they accept or reject the National Energy Board's recommendations and whether they approve the pipeline. So
the National Energy Board said yes, you can go ahead.
They greenlit it in December.
Okay.
They have never rejected a pipeline. In the history of the organization, they have rubber stamped every proposal that's come across their desk. So that was not a huge surprise.
And the federal cabinet will approve or reject it by the end of June.
They will perform their political calculus. They'll look at what's happening across the country. They'll look at their plans for the election in 2015, and they'll decide whether they really want to hang this around the necks of every Conservative MP running for re-election in BC in 2015.
Interesting to see. It's a big decision for this country. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier also that you had applied to be, regarding the Kinder Morgan pipeline,
right?
You were going to be an intervener.
Well, that was the only option that we had, and so just to give you some background, my grandmother lives in North Burnaby, and our family has property on Main Island, which is directly in the path of a spill if there were ever an accident in Georgia Strait. Kinder Morgan's own simulations show that the beach where I learned to fish as a child would be wiped out within 24 hours. So that is something that concerns me, and I thought that our family was directly affected, and so I went and applied as an intervener just to speak on their behalf before the Joint Review Panel. Despite my misgivings about the process, I thought it was important to participate in good faith, and so I submitted an application, and today I found out that I'm not considered directly affected, and neither are any other citizens in BC aside from the 400 groups and companies and associations and homeowners that have been selected as interveners. So you've got a project that will affect more than 2 million people that's coming right through the Lower Mainland, through an earthquake zone, loading tankers in the heart of Metro Vancouver, then sending those out under 3 bridges, past the Gulf Islands, around Victoria, and out through the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And they've got 400 people that they've allowed to speak. Everybody else has been rejected or told to write a letter, which nobody reads. So I don't think that's a democratic way to arrive at a decision. You can't just shut the public out of the process and then render a decision and expect people to see that as legitimate. And I think the majority of British Columbians look at what's happened with the environmental review process federally, and they say this is not a legitimate way to make decisions about these projects that are so important to our future.
When is the Kinder Morgan hearings, or whatever they are, taking place?
Well, we should find out soon. This is the first step. Finding out who's on the intervener list and who's been rejected is a first step towards setting a panel and starting to put together hearings. But we do know that unlike with the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline, there will be no opportunity for citizens to provide an oral statement on the record or talk to the panel. At least with Enbridge, we were given 5 minutes to speak to the panel.
Why the difference?
Well, because it was getting too cumbersome. There were too many people who wanted to have a say, too many people who thought that they had an important story or personal details to share with the panel, and
the government can't be bothered anymore.
The government can't be bothered to consult people on projects like this anymore, so they shortened the process and kicked out everybody but 400.
Kai, we're out of time. Thank you very much. And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. It was shocking.
When people think of Asian medicine, they typically think of traditional Chinese medicine. But today on the show, we have another type of Asian therapy called Japanese meridian therapy. Hi, my name is Cameron Moffat, and you're watching Choices. And on this show, we interview healthcare practitioners from around the Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands and discuss with them the choices they offer us for our healthcare. I'd like to introduce and thank Dr. Katriana Heigelman from coming on the show. She is the owner of Inspire Acupuncture and a practitioner of the Japanese meridian therapy. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off by discussing a little bit about your training and what is involved to actually start practicing this form.
Yes, so I'm trained as Doctor of Traditional Chinese Medicine, as everybody in BC has to be in order to practice Oriental medicine.
Okay.
In the 5th year of my practice, I got exposed to studies by Ikeda Masakazu Sensei, a teacher of Japanese style meridian therapy.
Okay.
And I incorporated it into my practice, and I found in my practice that patients are really satisfied with this type of acupuncture, as it's a little bit gentler than the well-known common acupuncture.
Right. Now we're going to be doing a demo in a little while, and you'll have a chance to see the difference of the needles between the Japanese version of the needles and the Chinese needles, and you'll notice they are quite a difference.
Yes.
What a little bit about your typical cases that people come into your clinic for? What would you typically see, and then what also do you not so typically see coming in?
Well, in Oriental medicine, we are holistic practitioners. So yes, we all attract certain type of cases, but mostly we treat the patient, not the disease.
Right.
So we are able to, let's say, treat someone with gynecological issues, and perhaps two patients with the same Western disease will receive completely different treatment because we look at them as an individual and tailor the treatment accordingly. Where, for example, if the patient has completely different, two different patients have different disease, they might receive exactly the same treatment because they are within a certain pattern or within a certain constitution that requires that treatment. So we look at disease a little bit different. We look at it as an imbalance of human physiology.
Okay. Now, when you say human physiology, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're also looking at the balance between the yang energy and the yin energy. Is that not the sort of the basis of all Oriental medicine?
Correct.
So maybe you can explain to the viewers a little bit of what do you mean by yang energy and yin energy, and why is that so important in your diagnosis?
Right. So in Oriental medicine, we want to balance different energies, and the number one principle is the principle of yin and yang. That follows the 8 principles of qi and blood, yin and yang, which are subject to constant movement or constant struggle to achieve equilibrium in a human body. And they become imbalanced when the disease occurs, or exhausted when we become tired, and the disease, whether acute or chronic, can settle in the body. The yin and yang, it's a concept of duality in nature. So we have a daytime, nighttime, we have sun, we have moon, we have water, we have fire. So everything on this planet, in our universe, has those two extremes.
Sure.
And that's how that medicine has been tailored for 6,000 years, around observation of the nature and how those two energies are interacting.
Okay. So that's why you were explaining earlier, then two people could have the exact same Western type of disease, and yet what's really going on can be very, very different.
Correct.
And so I gather in your training, you're taught to look at the individual and find what that imbalance is for that person.
That's
Is
right.
that correct?
Correct.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, what would be something that, what do most people come in and see you for? I understand that you can probably work with many things, but what do you typically see come in your practice?
Perhaps it will be easier to say that I have 3 or 5 different typical issues that I treat. They usually are concerns about digestive system, so something around digestion, whether it's IBS or chronic abdominal pain or whatever it will be. But a lot of people come nowadays for digestive complaints or allergies around food,
Right.
food sensitivities. A lot of gynecological issues as well. I see a lot of people for infertility or postpartum issues, fatigue, depression. I also treat a little bit children because I'm trained in something called shonishin, which is a non-insertive technique of Japanese acupuncture for children.
So you're not actually inserting the needles?
No.
Oh, well, the children must appreciate that.
Very
And
much.
the parents
My own
probably
kids
do.
do.
Yeah, the children, exactly. Okay. So that allows you then to work with children without the trauma of being needled.
Absolutely. In classics, we believe that children shouldn't receive needles in early age because it injures their kidney, so it traumatizes them and makes them scared.
Okay.
So unless extreme circumstances, we don't like to perform acupuncture, insertive acupuncture for
Right.
children.
Okay. Because in the Chinese way of thinking, or the Asian way of thinking of the organs, is the fear not inherent within the kidney?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so you wouldn't want to bring in any fear. It would damage the kidneys at a young age.
That's right.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, so tell me, before we break now for the demo, tell me a little bit about the training you received. How is it different then in your advanced training than what you received in your more traditional Chinese medicine training?
Right. The Japanese meridian therapy is really focused on rediscovering classics. The modern traditional Chinese medicine is very wonderful base, I find, but with the Japanese meridian therapy, there is a lot of finesse around the technique.
Okay.
So the needling is very gentle and delicate and very palpatory based. So I often touch patients' meridian or abdomen or body in general to find which points I'm going to choose, and I will also want a specific response to see where I'm at with my treatment,
Okay.
as opposed to inserting the needles, letting them rest for 20 minutes, and perhaps that might be the regular treatment that you receive mostly nowadays with acupuncture.
That was my experience when I did actually see Dr. Heigelman, that for the hour and a half, the first treatment, you were constantly working on me, more or less.
Yes.
You were following the treatment along. Okay, we're going to stop now and take a bit of a break and set things up for a demonstration. We'll be back in just a moment, and you'll have a chance to see Katriana actually working on a demonstration. Hi, welcome back. We're actually going to have a demonstration now by Dr. Heigelman on how various aspects of her practice work. We're going to be looking a little bit at something called moxa, and she'll be demonstrating you some of the needles that she uses, and then also a little bit about how she actually goes about doing an assessment. Okay.
Great. So maybe I will start, thank you very much. Maybe I will start with a needle, just
Okay.
to show the difference, how the Japanese acupuncture needle is very, very fine.
Mm-hmm.
They're about as thin as your hair.
Right.
You see, I don't know if you can see on the camera.
Yeah, maybe just set it. So for those of you that have
They're
not
very
been to a traditional Chinese practitioner, these needles are quite a bit thinner than you would normally see, and a lot shorter as well.
So they're quite fine, and they're very, very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
They don't break, so they're very, very safe. Well, most needles don't break, they shouldn't. All the needles in North America are disposable, so after I use it with a patient, they have to be properly disposed.
Yes.
I will show on me how little sensation there is upon insertion. So this is pretty much it, what we need.
We get a picture of that. Just okay. So, and I notice you don't go in very far. It's
No.
very, very slight penetration.
That's right.
You explained to me before the show that you're also dealing with the energetics of the body by going in very slightly. There isn't that trauma to the skin.
That's right. We are in meridian therapy needling quite shallow.
Okay.
It's a little bit different than in traditional Chinese medicine sense, but we still are able to achieve very good therapeutic result.
Sure. Excellent.
So working with very subtle energy.
Okay.
And this type of insertion will be more common on hands and feet,
Okay.
where skin is quite innervated and the hands and feet are very sensitive.
Sure. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So what else do you have to show us?
So I will palpate our model's abdomen and see if we can find some tender spots,
Okay.
which will signify some sort of energetic imbalances and physiological things for me. I
Okay.
might not share it with the audience.
Okay.
And then I will try to release the tension from the
Okay.
abdomen. So let's see.
Wonderful.
So I need your feedback of if something feels tender. Out here. No. This one. A little bit there. Okay. And then a little bit here. Yes. So let's start with those two here. I would say this one here will be a little bit more important to start with. And let's see if I can release it first with pressure only.
Okay.
If not, I will start doing my moxa and my magnets.
Okay, all right.
See?
Now, can you explain to us why you're working down at the foot?
Yes, so this area in abdominal diagnosis corresponds to liver, even though the physiological liver or anatomically liver is positioned here.
Right.
It has to do with venous network return
Okay.
and how it's distributed in the abdomen. So this is my point where I test, and then I would like to release it by working with liver 4 point on the liver meridian. So
Okay.
let's see if I can do that.
So for those of you who are not
Is it
familiar with the
tender?
concept of meridians, that is the energy flow around the body from the various organs. And there are very distinct patterns in how that flows. And so right now the liver meridian is being worked with both hands right now.
Okay. How does it feel now?
Better?
Better. Good. So to make it feel even more better, we'll perform moxibustion on liver 4.
Okay.
How about that?
That sounds very interesting. Let's have a look. So while you're working, could you explain to the viewers what moxibustion actually is?
So the ancient character for acupuncture, it includes the character for the needle and fire and moxa. The most traditional way to do is to blend the needles with the moxibustion technique.
Okay.
Moxa is actually a herb, magwort. It's made from magwort herb. This particular one is called gold moxa, and it comes from Japan, and it has to be processed and dried for 12-14 years before it has its therapeutic result.
Wow.
So I made prior, I made this nice snake of moxa, which makes it easier for me to apply.
Mm-hmm.
You might feel a little bit of heat on the foot. Oh, this is my nervousness on camera.
And then it just burns down very quickly.
It burns down very quickly, and I pinch it just before it reaches the skin, so it's not too uncomfortable for the patient. You should do 7 cones.
So the idea then is to stimulate the energy at that point. Is that what the moxibustion is doing?
That's right. So I'm working with point liver 4 on the liver meridian.
Mhm.
That corresponds to liver, but also corresponds to metal in the five elements theory,
Okay.
5 phases theory. So this one in particular will move stagnation in that area, in that quadrant of the abdomen.
Up through here.
That's right.
Okay.
Let's see if that will be enough. I'm sorry if it's too hot. It's okay? Okay. After a while, patients really love it because it feels quite comforting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are a little nervous at first to have moxibustion performed on their body. I even do it on my son, who is 1 year old, and he doesn't mind.
He doesn't mind. Well,
No.
he's a lucky guy. Okay.
So we have a little bit of smudge of our moxa here, but that washes off. And let's see, how is this area? How is that sensation? Feels good.
Gone, yeah.
It's pretty much gone. Yeah, I feel it also more malleable to touch right now.
Okay.
My fingers can go deeper with no
So-
hardness.
The stagnant energy then was causing the hardness that you were palpating,
right.
and now it's flowing more, so hence not as as tough.
That's right.
Wonderful.
Correct. Yes. We could possibly check. Actually, the point number 1 has released quite a bit too, would
Okay.
you say? There is still a tiny bit of tension. We could, yes, right there. Let's see if we can do anything about that. So I'll just work with acupressure, or for speed of the show, we'll try to use magnets.
So let's show the, can you maybe do that on this arm here?
Yes.
And let's show the viewers what you're using there, because this is quite significant. This is a nice way that someone can go home with that still on your skin after the treatment. And how long would you leave it on for?
You can leave it for up to 2 days.
2 days, and it continues to work.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Sometimes I'll use magnets, for example, on children or elderly or anyone who's sensitive. I might use microneedles or magnets.
Okay.
And these would be take-home treatments.
Wonderful. Okay. While you're doing that, I'm going
Yes.
to say goodbye to the audience
Yes.
and thank them.
Okay.
So we're running out of time. Thank you very much for watching Choices. Next few episodes on Choices are going to be a practitioner studying and practicing something called body talk. And we're going to be having a naturopath coming on and doing a type of therapy for joints called prolotherapy, which anybody who's had an injured joint will find quite interesting. I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. It's been very, very interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Moffat.
You
My
are
pleasure.
very welcome,
Thank
and
you.
have yourself a good day.
Perfect.
Kim, you can enjoy the treatment, and hopefully things keep working. Now, how long should she leave that on for?
Up to 2 days.
2 days. Okay, good. All right. If Kim was coming back for another treatment, what would you expect to see happen? Would there be any changes? Would you be looking again at the same liver meridian points?
Right.
Okay.
Very, very likely, if she came with a digestive complaint, I would see that improving. There would be significant improvement.
Well, we all need help with our digestive systems these days. So once again, thank you very much. My name is Cameron Moffat, and on behalf of all the crew here at Choices and at Shaw, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next episode.